Thank you for coming to this channel, and I hope that you will visit the website dismantlecapitalismglobally.com. That is dismantlecapitalismglobally.com. I continue to push through and continue to give a different narrative about the system of capitalism because I know that I'm not going to see it in mainstream media. I know that the narrative is set in how mainstream media presents the capitalists. Of course, they present them as heroes, as people who we need to survive. But they're not heroes at all. The venture capitalists are not heroes. They continue to cause the greatest problems in the world, and their ignorance continues to have a social effect. Not understanding the world because you think being a billionaire or a millionaire is the ultimate solution is a problem, and we have to look at them not as heroes as they are painted, but to really look at them as how they are ruining the lives of people like you and me, the working class, just the poor who have already been pushed into poverty, right? So it's unsettling to continuously see different media outlets celebrate people who are in an undertone kind of way, causing much more divisions than they are helping the world. But mainstream media needs a paycheck, right? And to get a paycheck, you have to side with the ones with the money, and that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that people will place money over morals and betterment for humanity. But I will be the first to tell you that, and certainly I will not be the last to tell you that um, capitalism is not going to help this world. It's not going to solve the problems of the world. Being rich is not going to solve the problems of the world. It has not solved the problems. Because the problem is bigger, right? It's a problem where you have to look at the dynamics, not just some individual who became rich and wants notoriety all of a sudden. No, that is not how we analyze situations and circumstances. We look at everybody in the circle, and to get a better conclusion as to what is really happening. Unfortunately, and again, in mainstream media, a lot of media that we see on a daily basis, there is an individualistic, linear viewpoint, and that is how it's marketed, as though, oh well, if I can do this, if I can become a millionaire, if I can become a billionaire, then so can you. And it's a false narrative. It's an illusion that is not going to happen. We are not all going to be rich. We are not going to be um, you know, having an empire or a mini empire. It is not going to happen. That is not how capitalism works. Capitalism works from the angle that one person may rise to have an empire, but that person is going to need workers. They will always need workers to help the empire remain afloat, right? So to continue with that illusionary perspective, even in the world of grown-ups, right? It's false. It is not. It's pushing a false narrative in times when there are so many historical contexts to this system, so much historical evidence that shows that it is not a system that is going to make us rich. It is not a system of betterment. It is a system of destruction. And the sooner we get to that understanding, the better we may be able to move forward with better understanding and knowledge of the system of capitalism. Um, I'm starting off on a philosophical note here. I always do that. I'm so philosophical sometimes, but I did promise that I would do a book takeaway on How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Rodney Walter or Walter Rodney, and I did that. I did it via Zoom, and I had a presentation and everything. And unfortunately, I was not able to upload it to YouTube, so it is on the website. Um, dismantlecapitalismglobally.com. That is dismantlecapitalismglobally.com. I kind of gave a little synopsis of what I took away from the book because, again, I've said before in my previous videos, the book is really a great case study, and he goes deep into capitalism and colonialism and how all of that is interconnected. They're not separated in any way. So check that out. Also, I want to give a big shout out to my friends at wechargecolonialism.org. We charge, CHARGE, colonialism.org. They are an organization that is aiming to highlight the issues that African Americans are facing, and they continue the conversations on colonialism and how it's impacting the lives of black and brown people and the history of it, of course. So please check them out. They are also on YouTube, so they are there. You don't have to go far to find them. Today, I want to talk about how capitalism affects the individual and the group. So not just me, not just you, but countries. The venture capitalist is gonna go after whatever he or she needs to go after, whomever he or she needs to go after to secure resources, to get a hold of resources. I mean, that's what this war in Ukraine is about. It's resource. There's gas there, and the NATO countries, they are just willing to ruin a country, an entire country's infrastructure, an entire country's democracy, or however that country defined itself. I'm talking about Russia. They are willing to push them aside to get to the resource without any kind of constructive dialogue as to why they're there, and how can that, you being there, how can it be a peaceful a peaceful dialogue that could potentially avoid war. That is not how it happened, unfortunately, and that is the clearest visual of how the venture capitalists work. They are violent. The venture capitalist is a heavily patriarchal person who thinks that he can go wherever he needs to go to get whatever he needs to get without having humanitarian dialogue and conversations with other people. And of course, he drags the female into it, and you'll see that in every capitalistic agenda. You're gonna see that very overzealous venture capitalist who does not care about anything else, anything that is happening in the world. He or she does not care, because the goal is to get to something that is valuable, something that could end up on the market. And that is why, with colonialism, that's why so many, like Europe has former colonies, and Europe still has protectorate countries where it still views the countries that it once colonized as protectorates, as though those countries still belong to Europe. So that is another visual for you to get into your mind of how colonialism had its capitalistic component to it, and it's never changed. It continues to be the theme, and that is why you have so many social disparities in this world. Is because the venture capitalist, who's usually from the north, Europe and the United States, because remember, the United States continues to carry on the legacy of Europe, and the black and brown people in this country, for example, feed in a European ideology even on a new territory. Capitalism is entrenched in that. It's entrenched in that cultural ideology of, and the colonialistic history of it. Don't it cannot be separated. Don't separate it because everything is working in an interconnected way. That's how history is told, or it's supposed to be told. But unfortunately, again, when history is told by different people, they give a different perspective. So, I had a history teacher for one time, and he was an African American history teacher who once told me that it's difficult for Europeans to tell history in the way that it actually happened, because there's a sense of guilt, of shame as to the global genocide and the global mass murder. I said genocide. Just the mess that Europe has created, not just in Europe. When you think of Eastern Europe and communism, but on the West side, when the West left Europe, they too created mess, but they did it in different territories. They dominated the different territories in Asia, in North America, in the Caribbean. They're in South America. Wherever they go, the goal is to dominate the territory, to dominate the community, and that's why in this country, for example, there's the one size fits all mentality here, but it is not a working model because we have different cultures in this country, right? And different cultures have different philosophies, different conclusions about life. But because Europeans have a dominant presence here, and that is historical, then of course they tend to be the ones to have the final say. But just think of how that is contributing to differences. It's contributing to the issues that we see. It's because you've got a cultural legacy in place, one group's culture, a legacy, and it more and more as we move forward, it feels as though black and brown people are just thrust into it, right? We are just thrust into that European mentality, and we continue. I'm sorry, that's my phone. We continue to fund their culture, their conclusions about life, and many times to our disadvantage. It is always to our disadvantage. I mean, when you look at the statistics of how Europeans have, gained what is it, prosperity, and compare that to black and brown people who are still striving for that, you will see it in plain sight. You will see how visible those differences in socioeconomic conclusions are. And it has to raise your consciousness, it has to raise your awareness as to, this historical those historical actions, let's just say, because all of that contributed, different actions, different phases contributed to a solidification of them being in a position where they can have a dominance, a cultural dominance in a country like the United States. Definitely in Europe. I mean, this is their continent. That makes sense. But when you see them leaving the continent, that's where the chaos begins, and that's where the group, collective, capitalist analysis would come in. Like when they did leave and when they did communicate with the Middle East or the countries in Africa, it was not to the advantage of the Middle East or Africa. It was more, they were there, the Europeans were there more for stuff, for material. And they did everything in their power to access it, to, whether it meant, assassinating presidents and leaders. They definitely did that. And you'll definitely find more explanation about that in Dr. Walter Rodney's book. So that's the group dynamic. But the individualistic dynamic is somewhat complex because, a lot of people will tell you there's no such thing as an individual. I am a manifestation of my group. Everything that my group represents culturally, I am manifesting that. So there's no reason why you should look at me as just an individual, but I belong to a community. In the same way, I look at other people like they belong to a community, they belong to a village, they belong to something, a culture, right? And in this culture, I'm sorry, my uh, my internet is acting up. In this cultural dominance, you have, or this cultural definition, you're gonna have a you're going to have different ways of doing things, different ideas, different I'm sorry, yeah, sorry about that. Culture means the way of life of a group. It is everything that we do, from what we eat to how we celebrate different, holidays, and also religion, how we worship. All of that is culture. It is all defined that way. So the individualism is not a word or a terminology that should be used when you're dealing with capitalism. But the why I say that it's complex is say that is that in capitalism, does thrive on individualism. And it thrives on that because you'll see that in the European culture, they thrive on individualism. They're willing to disconnect from their group, from their families to get to wherever is it that they need to get to. But in other cultures like Asia and Africa cultures, there's that attachment. So they tend to operate more with group economics. It's a group of people doing things together to create a profit or an empire. But with individualism and capitalism, which is the structure that we are working under, black, brown, white, all of us are unfortunately under this structure because of Europe's domination. Sorry, my phone is acting up. Because of Europe's domination in the world, then you have this conclusion nowadays that everything is about me. That's why you see so many people like black rappers, for example. They're willing to say, I'm not going back to the community, I'm not willing to do this. Or rich black people say, I'm not going back, I'm not going to help the community at all. And that is a disservice. That is an unfortunate conclusion, since you belong to that community, you will always belong to that community, especially as a black and brown person. So we have to differentiate, is what I'm saying, culturally. Like, the one size fits all is not working. It is not the best conclusion, but it happened due to a domination, a capitalistic domination. And that's why we have it now. But again, in a 21st century world with so much information, with the understanding of power structure, you have to differentiate. You have to understand why these different groups of people are working differently, or they are seeing things differently, and that's why the different conclusions are coming about. And that's why you have to be open to that kind of dialogue, because you cannot expect all of us to have that same mentality. We did not experience life in the same way. We have different levels and different phases of how civilization came to be. The civilization that we have now, in Western civilization, as we call it, it did not start on an equal footing. There were many, injustices which came about for this civilization to come into place. So when you're thinking of individualism and collectiveness, have an understanding of how that should play out, because it's important for you to be able to know what is it, whose culture is that we're pushing from an individualistic tone. So if you're a black and brown person, then there's no reason why you should be pushing another person's culture and not yours. There's the cultural identity is very important, and you should definitely understand why you have to identify with your own, because you have to be able to push your own. You have to be able to hold up your own, to not turn your back on your own. Even in a capitalistic definition, where it's telling you you don't need that group, you don't need that village, you don't need that community. You just need your own mind, your own body, and you're gonna be fine. Yeah, capitalism again is a system of falsehood, and you should not fall into its mess. It will make your life messy if you focus primarily on it. But you have to be better than that. You have to understand that the value is in people, humanity. It is not in just money and gaining money. You have to put your mindset in a different way, where you are, respecting people. You are trying to understand why they're in situations, especially in a capitalistic definition. Thank you. I think I've spoken enough. I hope that you will go to the website again, dismantlecapitalismglobally.com. If you want to read more, I also have another website, changingali.com. That is changingali.com. My last name is ALIE, and changing, CHANGINGALIE.com. Thank you for watching. I hope that you'll continue to view my videos. I hope that you'll continue to visit the website, and I hope that you will continue to be a model of change, that you will not fall into the shenanigans that other people want you to fall into, so that you can just be an individual. You are not an individual. You belong to people. You belong to a community. And I hope that you place more emphasis on the community that you come from, not just on your own system or your own beliefs. Thank you again. I hope to have you again.